We received your message, and we understand. We beg you now to return our mother to us so that we can celebrate.
They say kidnappings are supposed to be simple, fast, quiet, over before anyone even realizes something is wrong. So explain this. What kind of intruder stays inside an 84-year-old woman's house for 41 minutes? What could possibly take that long? What were they searching for? And why would anyone risk staying that long inside a home where every second increases the chance of being caught? Because this case begins like a crime, but quickly starts feeling like something far stranger.
So if you go from 1:47 a.m., which is when the doorbell cam got disconnected, to 2:28 a.m., which is when her pacemaker, meaning she, got far enough away from her phone that the app stopped communicating with the pacemaker, that is 41 minutes. 41 minutes.
An elderly woman disappears from her peaceful house in the Catalina Foothills outside Tucson. Cameras suddenly stop recording. A security system is quietly disabled. A pacemaker app disconnects from her phone. Small drops of blood appear on the porch. Her purse is still inside. Her keys are still inside. Her phone remains untouched on the counter. Her Apple Watch sits charging beside the bed. Nothing about the scene suggests someone calmly left on their own. And then something even stranger happens.
As I said yesterday, we saw some things at the home that were concerning to us. We believe now, after we processed that crime scene, that we do in fact have a crime scene, that we do in fact have a crime, and we're asking the community.
Messages start appearing in newsrooms instead of reaching the family. Not phone calls, not negotiations, just written demands claiming she is alive, frightened, and waiting. At the center of it all is her daughter, Savannah Guthrie, which leaves one unsettling question investigators still cannot answer. Was this really a ransom kidnapping? Or did something happen inside that house that someone desperately needed to hide?
I think I told you, she is very limited in her mobility, right? We know she didn't just walk out of there. That we know. There are other things at the scene that indicate she did not leave on her own.
At 9:48 p.m., the garage door rises slowly into the night air of the Catalina Foothills. Car pulls inside. 2 minutes later, the door lowers again. Another routine evening ends exactly the way thousands of evenings have ended before. An elderly woman steps out of the vehicle and walks into her home. No urgency. No visible fear. Just the quiet rhythm of a normal life continuing as expected. Nothing appears unusual. The street outside remains silent. Desert air drifts across the neighborhood. Porch lights glow the same way they always do. Then time begins to stretch. Hours pass with nothing recorded, nothing reported, nothing noticed.
Was a kidnapper doing in Nancy Guthrie's home for 41 minutes? How does it take 41 minutes to kidnap an 84-year-old woman? I realize they don't move slowly. It certainly appears as though she fought. Something happened to cause her to bleed on her front porch or patio area, as it appears she was being taken out of the home.
The house sits peacefully under the dark Arizona sky. But inside that quiet stillness, something is already unfolding. 1:47 a.m. The first strange signal appears. The doorbell camera stops transmitting. Not buffering. Not losing connection slowly. It simply shuts off. Disconnected. Someone inside the property did not want the lens watching anymore. From that moment forward, a clock begins running. Not the kind anyone can hear, but the kind investigators later reconstruct second by second. 41 minutes. That number would soon become the most uncomfortable detail in the entire case. Because kidnappings are not supposed to last that long. Professionals who study abductions explain it the same way every time. The longer someone stays inside a location, the greater the risk becomes. More time means more chances for witnesses, alarms, passing vehicles, neighbors noticing something strange. Which raises a question that investigators would repeat again and again. What was happening inside that house for 41 minutes? Motion sensors provide the next clue. At approximately 2:12 a.m., activity is detected near the front entrance. The security system itself has not triggered an alarm, but something clearly moves through the monitored space. Later, Technicians confirmed that portions of the monitoring system had been manually disabled. The cameras were present. The equipment was installed. But the house had a hidden weakness. The cloud storage subscription that archived the footage had quietly expired weeks earlier, which meant the cameras could see, but they could not remember. And then comes the detail that investigators would later call the moment everything changed. At 2:28 a.m., a small medical device stops communicating. The pacemaker monitoring application connected to Nancy's phone suddenly loses its signal. Doctors explain the technology simply. The phone must remain within roughly 30 feet of the pacemaker to maintain connection.
So, something happened here just a few minutes ago. We received an email at TMZ from somebody purporting to basically issue a ransom demand. I'm not going to read this, but the top line to it is that they are asking for money.
When the signal drops, it means distance has been created. Nancy is no longer near the phone. She is no longer inside the house. Gone. The next morning begins like any other scheduled day. At 9:15 a.m., the caregiver arrives at the home expecting a routine visit. But the first sign of trouble appears before the door is even opened. The front door is unlocked. That alone is unusual. Inside, the scene becomes even stranger. Nancy's purse rests exactly where it should be. Her keys sit nearby. Her phone remains inside the house. Her Apple Watch is still charging on the nightstand in the bathroom cabinet. The medications she takes daily to regulate her heart are untouched. Everything that someone would need to leave the house voluntarily is still sitting exactly where it belongs, which leads investigators toward a single conclusion. She did not walk away. She was taken. Deputies from the Pima County Sheriff's Department arrive at the property shortly after 9:27 a.m. and the moment they step inside, something feels wrong. Not chaotic, not destroyed, but wrong in a quieter, more deliberate way. The front door frame shows subtle pry marks, signs of forced entry. Outside on the porch, investigators notice something small but deeply troubling: tiny droplets of blood. Not a large pool. Not violent splatter. Just several small spots. Later testing confirms the blood belongs to Nancy, which means at some point near that doorway, a struggle occurred. But perhaps the most disturbing discovery is something that is no longer there. The doorbell camera itself is missing. Not shattered. Not damaged. Removed. Taken completely from the wall. As if whoever entered the house didn't just want to avoid being recorded. They wanted the device itself to disappear. Because sometimes the most important clue in a crime scene is not what investigators find. It is what someone worked very carefully to remove.
Felt like somebody means business. I mean, when you read it, it's very detailed. This person thought through, I believe, again, if it's legit, this person thought through the markers of showing that it's real. The Bitcoin address, we checked immediately, and it's a real address.
Outside the house, the night had not remained completely silent. Rain earlier in the evening had softened the gravel in the driveway, leaving faint impressions behind. By the time investigators arrive, much of the evidence has already been washed away. But forensic teams still managed to extract one general conclusion: a vehicle had been there. Likely a mid-sized van or SUV. No clear tread pattern survives long enough to identify the exact model. Just the vague outline of weight pressing into damp gravel. A shape without a name. But nearby surveillance cameras begin filling in the missing pieces. About a mile and a half from Nancy's home sits a small convenience store that remains open through the night. Its parking lot camera captures something interesting. Around 2:00 a.m. a light-colored van pulls into viewpoint. Two people sit inside, both wearing dark clothing, both appearing to keep their faces partially covered. They enter the store briefly. They buy bottled water, a few snacks. Nothing unusual, nothing dramatic. Yet investigators quickly notice something missing. The license plate is not visible on the camera. Whether removed, covered, or simply angled out of view remains unclear. More neighborhood cameras are collected as detectives expand the search radius. One private security system records a similar van driving down Nancy Street earlier in the night. Approximately 1:30 a.m. then another sighting places a vehicle matching that description heading toward the interstate sometime after 2:40 a.m., which means whoever was driving that van may have been in the area both before and after Nancy disappeared. Prepared, patient, not rushed. And that detail continues to bother investigators more than almost anything else. Because panic leaves fingerprints. This scene does not look panicked. Inside the house, drawers remain closed. Jewelry sits untouched. Electronics remain in place. Cash has not been taken. If robbery had been the goal, the intruder ignored every obvious opportunity. Which brings attention back to the one number investigators cannot stop thinking about. 41 minutes. Former analysts studying the timeline begin raising an uncomfortable possibility. That amount of time suggests searching, someone moving room to room, looking for something specific. Documents, storage drives, a particular item hidden somewhere in the house. Because removing an elderly woman with limited mobility would not require 41 minutes. It would require less than 5. And that observation leads to a theory investigators initially hesitate to discuss publicly. What if the kidnapping was never the original plan? What if someone entered the house expecting something else entirely? What if Nancy woke up during that search? A confrontation. A moment of panic. A situation that quickly spiraled into something far more serious. If that theory were true, then everything that happened afterward could represent something very different. Not a kidnapping plan, but a story constructed after the fact. Days later, the investigation reaches a turning point. The Federal Bureau of Investigation formally joins the case. Once federal agents step in, the strategy shifts immediately. Helicopters that had been scanning the surrounding desert are reassigned. Drone sweeps are reduced. The massive search operation begins to shrink. Because the case is no longer being treated as a missing person investigation. It is now considered a potential abduction. Which means the focus changes. Investigators stop asking where Nancy might have gone. Instead, they ask a different question entirely. What happened inside that house between 1:47 a.m. and 2:28 a.m. 41 minutes that now sit at the center of the entire investigation. And just when detectives believe the timeline cannot become more complicated, the case takes an unexpected turn. The first message arrives, but it does not go to the police, and it does not go to the family. It arrives somewhere else entirely.
Began the letter. I don't think I'm giving anything away here. They began the letter by saying that that Nancy is okay but scared. So they say she is okay, and also that she's aware of the letter and the demands.
That Nancy Guthrie herself is aware of it.
The message appears inside the inbox of a national media outlet. Not a phone call, not a voice recording, just a carefully written email demanding millions of dollars in Bitcoin. The message is calm, structured, almost clinical. No emotion, no greeting, no explanation, just instructions. The outlet receiving that message is TMZ, which immediately raises a new question. Why contact the media first? Buried inside the message are two details that immediately capture the attention of investigators. The writer states that Nancy was not wearing her Apple Watch when she was taken, and the message references a damaged floodlight outside the home. Neither of those details had been released publicly, which means whoever wrote that message knew something about the crime scene. Within hours, nearly identical messages begin appearing at local Tucson television stations. Same wording, same Bitcoin demand, same unsettling tone. But the most confusing part is not the money being requested. It is the behavior. Real ransom kidnappings follow a predictable structure. The kidnapper contacts the family. Negotiations begin. Proof of life is exchanged. A communication channel opens, but this sender refuses all of that. The message clearly states there will be no communication, no replies, no negotiation. Only a single direction of contact, which creates a strange situation, a ransom demand that cannot actually lead to a ransom payment. And then one line inside the message pushes the story into the national spotlight. The sender claims Nancy is alive. Aware? Frightened. A statement that cannot be verified. The family now faces an impossible situation. They cannot call the sender. They cannot respond to the demand. They cannot even confirm that the person sending the message actually has Nancy, so they do the only thing left. They go to the same place the kidnapper went. The media. Nancy's daughter, Savannah Guthrie, appears in a public video alongside her siblings. Her voice remains calm, but the desperation underneath is impossible to hide. She explains something investigators have already been considering privately. Technology has changed the rules of proof. Voices can be cloned. Videos can be manipulated. Artificial intelligence can imitate someone almost perfectly, which means even if a recording appeared showing Nancy alive, it might not actually prove anything, so the family asks for something simple, the detail that a question. Something only Nancy herself would know. Something that cannot be fabricated. Meanwhile, investigators begin noticing another troubling pattern. The deadlines mentioned in the ransom messages arrive and pass quietly. February 5th. Nothing happens. February 9th. Still. Nothing. No escalation. No additional proof. No consequences carried out, which is not how ransom kidnappings behave. That if money were truly the goal, pressure would increase. Instead, the sender appears strangely patient, almost detached. Profilers begin revisiting the same theory again and again. Perhaps the kidnapping narrative was never meant to succeed. Perhaps it was meant to distract. Because the deeper investigators examine the timeline, the more the same question keeps returning. 41 minutes inside a quiet house, no valuables taken. Security systems deliberately disabled. A camera physically removed. And a story delivered directly to the media. A story that may exist for one reason only. To explain something that happened inside that house during those 41 minutes. If you've stayed with this story until now, then you can probably feel it too. This case doesn't behave like a normal disappearance. It feels like a puzzle where every piece exists, but none of them lock together the way they should. An elderly woman disappears from her home. Security cameras suddenly stop recording. Pacemaker signal drops. Small traces of blood appear near the door. And instead of quiet negotiations behind the scenes, messages begin appearing inside media inboxes. Deadlines are announced, then quietly pass with no consequences, no proof, no clear direction forward. And through all of it, one question keeps returning to the center of the story. What truly happened during those 41 minutes inside that house? Investigators are still following leads. Evidence is still being reviewed. Somewhere, someone may already know the answer that has been hiding inside that timeline from the very beginning. But cases like this are often solved when someone notices something others overlooked. So now I want to hear from you. Does this look like a traditional ransom kidnapping? Or does it feel like something unexpected happened that night and everything afterward was designed to explain it away? Why would a kidnapper contact newsrooms instead of the family? Why refuse negotiation if money is the goal? And why does the timeline inside the house feel more important than the ransom itself? Share your thoughts below, because sometimes the most valuable insight comes from people paying close attention. If this breakdown kept you thinking, consider leaving a like so more viewers can discover the case. Subscribe for more deep investigations into mysteries that seem simple at first, but reveal something far more complicated beneath the surface.